Joshua, it's great seeing you.
Hey, real pleasure, and good to be back on your show, talking to you again.
Yeah. You've been to Korea like 3 times so far?
3 times since last year. Yeah, I did my first trip, I believe, in October last year.
And you know what's going on with South Korea with President Yoon impeached, and he relinquished his power momentarily right now, and there's a court case in the Korea Supreme Court case. What's your thought on this whole thing? I think you're the only journalist who talked about the voter fraud that has been rampant in, the controversy has been rampant in South Korea. You're the only American journalist who talked about it. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I do remember that, and I was provided with different documents at the time when the election happened, when those concerns were coming out. I read them pretty thoroughly, and I think people talk to me about that because in America, I was also one of the people noting some of the issues with our elections. Personally, I think these things are going to be resolved. Personally, I think Donald Trump is saying that now he's in office, he's going to be investigating all the systems of the elections, because from what it sounds like, the issues South Korea is having is almost the same thing America has been dealing with. And I believe that as it's dealt with in America, it will be dealt with in South Korea as well. And I would say the same applies to a lot of the foreign subversion issues that your president brought up as well.
Do you know about the issue back? It happened in Phoenix, Arizona, back in 2020 during the 2020 U.S. presidential election. That there was a Korean airline that was stuffed with ballots, and it was confiscated here. Do you know about that issue?
I remember seeing reports on it. I don't know if it was ever verified. The problem we had in America was because everything was so heavily censored.
Yes.
It was difficult to investigate. If you investigated, you got attacked. And you also had people trying to feed false information to the investigators so that they would libel themselves or, get sued or something like that. And so it was very hard to see what was true and what was false. But without a doubt, I think there were many areas that were true. The problem is it has not been allowed to be investigated unless you want to get viciously attacked. Things are changing now, and I believe the truth will come out.
Do you think there's a CCP angle to this? Like some people have been speculating that behind the voter fraud situation that has been happening, not just the States, but in South Korea, that probably the Chinese government might be behind all that. Have you ever heard any kind of speculation regarding that?
Absolutely. Not only that, but the Chinese Communist Party has an entire government agency or military agency that is dedicated to what they call political warfare. In fact, I actually just published a special feature exposing some of these operations. The name of the Chinese military department used to be the General Political Department. In America, there are different think tanks that have written reports around Chinese political warfare. They have since changed the name of the organization. I can't remember the name they have for it now, but Xi Jinping reorganized the military and they changed the name of it. But yeah, they have very advanced programs for political warfare. A lot of these operate through what they call liaison work. The military will create they'll study the laws of different countries, they'll study openings and everything like that. The military in China will delegate this work through a few different organizations. The MSS, the Ministry of State Security, the MPS, the Ministry of Public Security, and then they run these also with the United Front Work Department. These 3 agencies will then work with they'll do what they call liaison work, where they'll go to front organizations operating throughout different countries, like what they call them Tongs, Chinese fraternal organizations. They run these through the Chinese consulates and embassies. The consulates and embassies will send out spies, Chinese spies or agents, to work with the heads of these different Chinese associations. The Chinese associations will then reach out to all their different members, and then they do liaison work with local politicians, business leaders, journalists, everything. In Taiwan, they're much more aware of this. There's a lot of public reporting on it, to the extent that Taiwan has even outlawed some of these operations. America is only recently starting to become aware of it. In fact, several Chinese agents have recently been arrested, tied to these organizations. When I was in South Korea, part of my work was investigating these networks. I was not able to publish a lot of my work because of South Korean laws on libel and defamation. And so unfortunately, a lot of what I researched there cannot be shown to the public. But one of the issues South Korea has is that you have a very vast network of Chinese agents working through the Tong, what they call the Tong system, Tong. And what these organizations do is they will bribe and blackmail politicians, business leaders, journalists, college professors, anybody of influence within the society, and then use them to what they call it capturing the civil society. The actual phrase they have under the United Front of the Chinese Communist Party is to capture the civil society. And the concept is that you can have your government, but the entire system that forms what the country is controlled by a foreign government. It'll look like you're an independent country, but your politicians are serving foreign interest. Your businesses are serving foreign interest. Your media and your academics and your entertainment industry is serving a foreign interest. And so even though you're an independent country, all the systems that control your society are not working for your society. They're working for a foreign government. And that's what the United Front aims to do. The biggest problem South Korea has is that your intelligence agencies are not allowed to go after and arrest Chinese agents. And so Chinese agents are running rampant in your country. Yeah, and that is what I really found in Korea, and that's what shocked me the most.
So you're saying that intelligence agencies, they are also compromised by these foreign entities
I don't
in
know,
Korea?
I don't know if I'd say they're compromised. I've met several former officials. I think they're actually very good, very strong integrity. But Korean law, South Korean law, is restricting them from being able to go after these individuals. I personally believe that your intelligence agencies are very good, but their hands are tied behind their backs. They're not able to do what they need to do to root out the problems that they're dealing with. From what I saw in the research I did there.
It almost sounds like a lot of South Korean politicians or probably even media members, powerful people, might be acting like puppets from a puppeteer that's probably in a different country.
That's the case. And to be clear, America has a lot of these same problems. My work I've been with Epoch Times since 2006. I've been a journalist for a very long time. I've been an investigative reporter since 2008. And my job as an investigative reporter began in 2008 because I accidentally uncovered these networks operating in the United States. Some of the individuals I exposed early on were actually investigated by the FBI. Some of them were actually sent to prison. Some of the organizations I was warning about 18 years ago, 16 years ago, with my work at Epoch Times, some of those organizations are only recently, the leadership is being arrested. In fact, just recently, one of the heads of what they call these Chinese police stations, these overseas police stations, where the CCP has been setting up police operations in America, one of them just pled guilty to it just this week, for example. And so even for America, only recently are things being done to go after these networks. And so I don't think it's the fault of the Korean system. Even the United States is only recently figuring out how to deal with these things. But I think it is one of the greater threats that we're facing currently for our country and yours.
And one of the documentary piece that you did for Epoch Times was regarding KBS. I don't know whether you're allowed to talk a little bit on that. So that KBS has the KBS broadcasting station, which is backed by the government, has been heavily influenced by CCP.
So there's a couple things with that. I can get into both. On the specific case you're mentioning, there was Shenyun Performing Arts, a New York-based performing arts company. Basically, the Chinese Communist Party does everything they can to stop Shenyun from doing its job and doing its shows. The reason the Chinese Communist Party does not like Shenyun is because Shenyun exposes the human rights abuses of the Chinese Communist Party in its pieces. The CCP hates that because they don't want this being known. The second thing is that Shenyun Performing Arts shows the culture of traditional China that the CCP has tried to destroy. And Shenyun, of course, being started by Falun Dafa practitioners, people persecuted in China for their faith. The CCP also is trying to suppress that and destroy it. And so anywhere Shenyun performs, even in America, the theaters will report that they get threats from China, they get pressure from China. Most free countries, they just ignore it. They're like, not only do they ignore it, but they expose it because they're offended by it. They're like, how dare you try to prevent me from showing this, right? In America, that's usually the case. In Korea, it turned out that the CCP was behind threats to KBS that got a Shenyang Performing Arts show canceled. And it turned out that the Chinese Communist Party had threatened financial damage to Korea I don't remember the number, but it was a lot of money. The CCP threatened financial damage to Korea if they dared to allow Shen Yun to perform. And KBS folded to CCP financial pressure and canceled the show. On the other side, when it comes to the subversion of your entertainment industry, this is important. The Chinese Communist Party regards South Korea as a threat on the culture front. And this goes back to the Korean wave and Korean entertainment and stuff like that. And the reason is this. American entertainment, Hollywood and so on, for a lot of the West and a lot of the world actually, America is kind of the cultural beacon, or at least used to be. It's kind of fading now because it went so political. But it did not resonate as much with China because the culture is different.
Right, Western.
Yeah, South Korean culture, because you share a lot of Confucian values, which China has, of course, very strongly as well. At least the older Chinese, the CCP has tried destroying that too. The values of Korea resonate with Chinese more than American culture.
That's why it's powerful.
And so the CCP regarded the Korean wave as a threat to its power. They regard Korea as a cultural threat. They believe that the CCP will lose influence if South Korean values, which still are very strong, freedom values, democracy, very strong on traditional values. You have to remember the CCP tried to destroy a lot of that.
Yeah.
Right? They destroyed. They used to demonize Confucius. They used to condemn Confucius. But a lot of the social values of Korea, even though they're more of a Christian country now, a lot of the social values, especially with respect for elders and everything, it comes from that, right? And so the entertainment really resonates with China. Because it resonated so much, the CCP began looking to infiltrate and control the Korean entertainment industry. To be fair, they've done the same thing to Hollywood. China, for example,
right.
Chinese companies, they bought up a lot of the talent studios, they bought up some of the theater chains, and it's very hard to get a film in China unless you co-produce it with the Chinese Communist Party.
They change the content too, right?
They do. They edit the films. You can't show American patriotic content. You can't show China in a negative light. That kind of stuff. You have to display core socialist values. They make you display socialism in a positive light, and that's part of the agreement. And you also have to feature like a certain number of Chinese actors and whatever else if you really want to get in. They began doing that to South Korea as well. And a lot of it is because South Korea, for its entertainment industry, they want to get into the Chinese market. Same reason for Hollywood, but for China, for the Chinese Communist Party, this is more important for them because they don't just view it as an instrument. They view South Korea as threatening. So they have a project within the Chinese military called the Northeast Project. And okay, for you Koreans out there, maybe do you remember when China said that kimchi is Chinese?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
We all remember it. We took great offense to that.
That was part of the Northeast Project. So what the CCP does is that they're trying to rewrite Korean history. And they're claiming that Korea, the entire Korean peninsula, is historically part of China. Right, and of course you had one of the empire, one of the dynasties, right?
I remember even like Korean traditional clothes hanbok. Chinese government is claiming that that's also from China.
That's the Northeast Project. That is an actual Chinese Communist Party military project. And what they're doing to South Korea is the same thing they're doing to Taiwan. They're saying we have historical ownership over you. It's what they're doing to Inner Mongolia, it's what they're doing to Tibet, it's what they're doing to Xinjiang or East Turkestan. They just haven't gotten so far as to actually take you over. But the narrative they're pushing, and they're teaching this in Chinese schools, they're trying to get it into Korean textbooks, they're trying to rewrite your history because eventually they do want to take you over. They do want to take you over. And I'll tell you right now, South Korea is entertainment, South Korea is semiconductors, South Korea is everything the Chinese Communist Party wants. And there's ways of conquering countries without invading you militarily. And the way you do that is through the United Front. The way you do it is by capturing the civil society. South Korea is in a very difficult position because of the degree to which the CCP has been able to run these spy operations without facing any kind of repercussions for it. But this is what they're trying to do to your country.
Do you see any like sympathizing voice among Koreans too, who supports that Chinese movement, even within Korea?
And I did. So keep in mind, my ability to expose what happened in Korea comes from the fact that I've exposed the same networks in America. I know in Korea it's very sensitive because of the student protests, the student uprisings, and because a lot of the older generations who were of that generation, they believe that they fought for democracy and against tyranny and so on. But because of that, they were also brought in to an extent to become sympathetic towards North Korea and towards the Chinese Communist Party. And so some of those individuals are more sympathetic to the CCP and view the United States as kind of the bad guy. I don't know if I would say that they would support the taking over of Korea. I don't think they would support that. But because they are more sympathetic to China, I would personally say a lot of them are maybe not aware of what the CCP is actually trying to do, is the way I see it.
Well, now we have President Trump coming back to office January 20th. When I see his cabinet members and his rhetoric, it seems like he has some kind of unfinished business with China. Do you think he would have this hardline stance and tariffs? Do you feel like Trump wants decoupling from the CCP? What is your thought on that?
So let's put it this way. In America, they don't call it decoupling, they call it de-risking. And the nature of that is, let me explain to you a bit of what happened. For a lot of countries, they were believing that opening up to China and investing in China, that on a very shallow understanding of communism. It's a very shallow understanding of communism, where they only look at it on economics. And so the belief was, if you trade with China, if you get them involved in capitalism, then they'll become less communist, right? If you're more capitalist, you're less communist. So that was the expectation. Also because during the Cold War, right, America, they wanted to break the Chinese Communist Party from the Soviet Union, because for America, the Soviet Union was regarded as a greater threat than the CCP was. But we knew we couldn't take them both on if a war were to break out, so we had to break that alliance. A lot of the business relations that were formed with China were for that purpose. And we believe that China would become more free, begin respecting human rights more if we engage with them economically. The lesson was the opposite happened. The Chinese Communist Party manipulated its access to business as a way of making the rest of the world less free. China did not become more free, the rest of the world became less free. And the CCP has used it now to also undermine global institutions. They're going after the US dollar, they're going after the Pax Americana, the very idea of what America represents. They're going after the ability of the United States to sanction other countries by trying to undermine the US dollar. Something Trump has said that if any country does, he will slap 100% tariffs on them, like for example with BRICS nations, for example. And also because of their military threats and their strategic use of rare earth minerals. And also during COVID, you might remember the CCP was threatening to cut America off for medical supplies when we actually import a lot of our pharmaceuticals and the ingredients for some pharmaceuticals from China. And so when they did that, America began realizing that if the CCP becomes hostile to us, they can cut off rare earth minerals, they can cut off medicines, they can cut off global shipping. And businesses began realizing that it was too risky for us to maintain those ties. Recent military doctrine in the United States even warned about this, where they said, this was just a couple months ago, that if a war were to break out with the United States and China right now, because it would pull in a global alliances, that if America does not have strong allies, we risk losing it. Not because we lack military strength, but because we rely too much on China for our supply chains. And so the solution to that, which America is aggressively implementing right now, is domestic manufacturing, reducing dependence on China to the extent where we're not dependent on them at all. They call this, again, de-risking. and again, pushing back on everything that we rely on them for. The addition to that of tariffs, the addition to that of the financial crisis China is facing both in the banking industry and manufacturing, in real estate, and the crumbling of their economies, their military alliance now with Russia and the hostilities from that, the fact that China is deemed as the key enabler by NATO, deemed the key enabler of the war in Russia with Ukraine, the fact that the Chinese Communist Party is engaging with Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, which is also, of course, making it so that they're puppeteering things through Iran in the war against Israel. The fact that the Chinese Communist Party is now recognized as a source of the drug threats against America. In fact, the United States just arrested a Chinese money launderer who was laundering the money for the Mexican cartels. And America also just arrested other individuals of Chinese nationality, one individual from China, who was facilitating the shipments of fentanyl to the United States. America is waking up to all of this, all at once. All these different avenues, each of which could collapse the Chinese economy. America is waking up to all at once. And so when you understand Trump, and Trump on the surface is saying, he says, I get along great with Xi Jinping and so on, you have to remember that Trump was waging a trade war with China. Trump was looking for a trade deal. COVID hit, the CCP became very aggressive, and the entire world began turning against China. Australia, Germany, even India, and so on. And remember, Australia used to be kind of close to them too. Japan became very strong against them. And so even countries that are, in America terms, very far left, have taken a very strong anti-CCP approach. The wave against China and the CCP is massive. And within Trump's administration now, even if Trump is saying trade deal, he's talking tariffs, 100% tariffs on China in some cases, or more, and saying decoupling in terms of breaking, not decoupling, but saying de-risking, breaking ties, or breaking our reliance, energy, manufacturing, steel, rare earth minerals. This alone will collapse the Chinese economy, this alone. But remember also, in terms of Trump's cabinet, he has people coming in now who recognize China as the number one threat to the United States. And in American Congress, Republicans and Democrats are both very much overwhelmingly against the CCP. And so I think you're going to witness the collapse of the Chinese Communist Party, the way things are heading right now.
That's tremendous amount of knowledge dump, Joshua. Where can we watch more of your work?
So I do a show called Crossroads, and it's on Epochtimes, EPOCHTIMES. We also have a Korean edition, which is Epochtimes Korea, and they translate some of my episodes.
Thank you very much, Joshua.
Pleasure.